Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Ashley Farmer and I'm delighted to be with you here today. Before we get started in our discussion, I want to offer a few thank yous. The first is to Dr. Morgan for inviting me to be here with you virtually today. The second is to Brian Mello and the Center for Ethics staff for putting together such a wonderful event and allowing us to commune virtually. I'm excited to be with you here today and talk about some of the questions posed about putting speech and thought into action. To give you a little bit of background, I'm a historian of Black women's intellectual history. That means that I am expressly interested in thinking about how African American women, who are activists and theorists, have navigated the dialectic of putting thought into action. Because of Black women's subject position, we have not been able to always just simply be in the private sphere or the public sphere, but had to travel back and forth between both and engage in a dialectic and thinking about how to liberate ourselves and put that thought into action. So I really think that my scholarship can offer something and contribute to our conversations today. So today I want to talk a little bit about some of the examples of putting thought into action from my book, Remaking Black Power, How Black Women Have Transformed the Era. I'll give you a little bit of overview of what I mean by Black Power, a couple of examples from my scholarship, and then I'll finish up by offering a couple of thoughts or parting thoughts about how the scholarship can help further the conversations that we are having. So first, I want to just talk a little bit about what I mean when I say Black Power. When I talk about Black Power, I'm talking about a set of ideas or principles and beliefs. I'm also talking about a major movement within the United States. The set of principles and ideas and beliefs, broadly construed, are community control, self-determination, and self-defense. And I want to emphasize here that certainly Black people have been fostering and promoting these ideas since we arrived on US soil as enslaved people in the 16 and 1700s. But the form that they take is historically and gender specific. And by gender specific, I mean that something like community control for a Black woman might look different than community control for other people. And community control might be something as simple as being able to control the right to your neighborhood or association. Something like self-determination may mean, the right to go to school where you want or to determine your own future. But for women in particular, it might be also control over your reproductive capacity or body. And self-defense is also a broadly construed term. Most often we think of something like armed self-defense, where people are defending themselves against a violence in a community, but it can also mean defense against negative stereotypes, defense against ideas about Black women, for example, being lazy, uncouth, hypersexualized, etc. So I want to emphasize the ways in which Black women are not only certainly, engaging perhaps in armed self-defense, but are also engaging in defense of their womanhood and their humanity. Now, when I am talking about Black Power as a movement, I'm talking specifically about the 1950s till about 1975, when these ideas of Black self-determination, community control, and self-defense gained widespread appeal and were adopted and enacted by a wide range of groups. And the examples that I'm going to give today are from that moment in which it coalesced into a movement. And I'm going to offer just a few short ideas about how Black women were putting speech into action, and particularly in the 1960s and in the 1970s. So one of my first examples is that of the Black Panther Party. Now, if there is any group known within the Black Power movement, it is probably the Black Panther Party because of their expansive political platform, because of their high profile, and because they are some of the kind of most lasting images we have of the movement. Often people actually interchange the idea of the Black Panthers and Black Power, but you should understand Black Power as a broad social movement or a big umbrella term, and the Black Panther Party fitting in between it or underneath it as one of the many ways in which Black people expressed Black Power in the 1960s and 1970s. So to give you a little bit of background, the Black Panther Party was started in 1966 in Oakland, California by two men, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. They were both the sons of migrants. We have kind of show a direct relationship between migration patterns of Louisiana up to California, both Los Angeles and the Bay Area. And they were men who had been already involved in the criminal justice system, in a lack of strong education, and in a life of poverty by virtue of segregation and Jim Crow laws in the middle of the 20th century. However, Black women quickly joined the party soon after its inception. So it was created in 1966, but by 1967, we had Black women, particularly in Oakland, joining the party and engaging in their ideals of Black power. The first known Black woman to join the party was then a high school student named Tarika Lewis, who's still active in the Bay Area today. Now, as women joined the organization, it also proliferated. And by 1970 to 1971, some estimate that Black women constituted up to 2/3 of the party's rank and file. We don't have exact numbers because there wasn't exactly a sign-in sheet when you came into the Black Panther Party. But nonetheless, we have no doubt that Black women were functioning at every level within the party and thinking about how to put the party's thoughts into action. Now, when we talk about the party's thoughts, we're talking about their political ideology. They certainly subscribed to the ideas of Black self-determination, community control, and self-defense, but they started to expand and offer more expansive ideas of ideology, and kind of more broadly construed. Eventually, they came to incorporate what we would call maybe like a class critique into their Black power critique or position, suggesting that we should not only think about the ways in which Black people are experiencing racism, but also think about the interrelationship of capitalism and imperialism with racism. They eventually came to call this new formulation of their political thought what we would call intercommunalism. And when they're talking about intercommunalism, they are suggesting, and I think rightly so, for especially in the 1960s and 70s, that America was becoming an imperialist global superpower, and that there was a small ruling elite of people, largely confined within America, that were setting the capitalist exploitation of people around the world. So instead of just simply functioning on Black people in America, the Panthers eventually advocated for Black and brown people the world over to join forces and create a communal network, hence the term intercommunalism, to advocate for the end of American imperialism both at home and abroad. And under that banner, they also created things called survival programs. And what survival programs were community action-based programs intent on helping the Black community and other Black and brown communities until that kind of idea of revolution could come to fruition. They often had the phrase survival pending revolution, and they argued that the survival programs were kind of a first aid kit to triage the immediate effects of this imperialism as Black people worked and other brown people worked towards the end of imperialism on a global scale. And Black women were very central to these ventures. They ran the survival programs by and large. And by survival programs, I certainly mean things like the free breakfast program, which many of you have heard of, but also there was everything from a free shoe program, a school, a free health clinic, a free voter registration, a range of activities that were meant to kind of create a safety net for Black and brown communities in the absence of government insurances. So first, I want to talk about a few examples of how Black women were putting speech into action and advocating for these survival programs. So I'm going to show you two images that are going to come up on the screen. The first one is an image of artwork that you would find in the Black Panther Party newspaper. And these images, both of which I'm going to show you, were created by a woman named Gail Dixon, who joined the party when it was in Seattle, when she was in the Seattle chapter, and eventually relocated to Oakland to kind of work for the newspaper full time. So in this particular image, you see an older Black woman, and she's got kind of, the only color is a green beret and a green jacket. I think this is very reminiscent of kind of the black leather jackets and black berets that the Panthers started with when we kind of see them come onto the scene in the late 1960s. You'll see that she's got a bag full of food, and in it is rolled up a flyer for Shirley Chisholm for president, which is one of my more personal favorite parts of this. Also, you'll see that she's got an Elaine Brown for City Councilwoman button, and then in the bag, which has free food, is a sign that says Bobby for Mayor, Bobby Seale for Mayor, Bobby Seale being one of the founders of the Black Panther Party. I'd also like to call your attention to the point above where the caption of the image is, and it says, let it shine, let the power of the people shine. So that's just one of the kind of examples that I want to show you today. I'm now going to switch to one other image that I want to show you as well. And this one was also done by Gail Dixon. So in this image, we see a Black woman who is, kind of dressed in what we would maybe think like her housewear. She's got a bag full of food from the free food program. Remember, that's one of those programs I told you about, one of the survival programs. She's got her hands on her hips. She's got a Bobby Seale for Mayor button. And then at the top of the image is a caption that we are assumed to mean expresses this woman's politics. It says, "Yes, I'm against the war in Vietnam. I'm for African liberation, voter registration, and the people's survival," right? So I give you these two images as an example for a couple of reasons. First, I want to explain that Black women in particular weren't always able to give speeches or offer their political thoughts in more traditional formats. That means getting, a platform and an audience because of racism and sexism. So these images are one way in which Black women, express their political thought and also compelled people to move towards political action. We see that in these particular images, they are suggesting that Black women are politically active and engaged members of their community. We're suggesting that they are voters, that they are engaged in the Panther survival program, such as the free food program, by evidence of them having, this bag of food. But also the captions above suggest that they have a kind of a global anti-imperialist politics, or an intercommunal politics, right, as we talked about before, that Black women, everyday Black women, can express. So while this was certainly only one way in which Black women put thought into action, I think it is important to think about because it counters this idea of the Black Panther Party and Black Power more broadly as being a masculinist movement in which there was not space for Black women to engage in thought and action. And it also offers us another venue or way through which we can understand how Black women, particularly, but not exclusively in the Black Power movement, were putting thought into action. I'd like to offer one more example that is similar but not exactly the same of the ways in which Black women were engaged in political thought and action in Black Power. And that is through the Third World Women's Alliance. So the Third World Women's Alliance, often shortened to the TWWA, was a group of Black and brown women who banded together under an anti-racist, anti-sexist, and anti-imperialist platform. This group developed out of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, often known as SNCC, which we know for engaging in the beginning of the 1960s in sit-ins and eventually developing into a Black Power organization that advocated for all Black political parties and self-defense and community control. So this group began as a Black women's group, but they were approached by women, particularly Puerto Rican women, who suggested to them that even though they did not identify as Black, they were still suffering under the weight of racism, sexism, and capitalism or imperialism, and that perhaps that they could join forces. In doing so, the group moved out kind of under the umbrella of SNCC and became its own group that was focused on Black women and other women of color, and both arming them with a political ideology and helping them fight for their full engagement in society. So like the Panther Party, the Third World Women's Alliance, or the TWWA, had an underground magazine or newspaper called Triple Jeopardy that had very wide reach and was very popular. And in it, they not only reprinted speeches that Black women and brown women in the group gave at local places like New York or the Bay Area, but they also tried to help figure out how to put this ideology or this political thought in action. So to give you an example of, just a speech that would be reprinted in Triple Jeopardy, one is by their leader, Frances Beale, who talked about what the goals of Triple Jeopardy were. And in this particular speech, she says to both those in the audience at the time at New York and then those readers of Triple Jeopardy, is that the task before us is to develop a sisterhood of third world women that stretches across all countries, a sisterhood which finds within itself the resolve and strength to actively participate in all phases of a liberation struggle, while at the same time making sure that the role of women in the new society will be one which will not be oppressive and will not be a continuation of the kinds of stunning attitudes which are still in mode today. So again, this is Frances Beale talking in the 1960s about the goals of the Third World Women's Alliance, right? And here she's suggesting that not only do they need to create a revolutionary movement in which women are, able to be equal part, but also that their kind of goal, their end result of this movement is one in which they don't want to reinscribe the racism, sexism, and imperialism that is keeping Black and brown women down at that particular moment. So that's kind of the speech or the way in which the Third World Women's Alliance is thinking. And to give you an example of how they're putting this into action, I want to also go back to their newspaper, Triple Jeopardy. So in their newspaper, in addition to offering up kind of array of reports about events taking place in the world, reprints of their speeches, their kind of essays about political action, they had what we call a knowledge and skill building section. And in this particular section, they were trying to give readers the tools that they needed to put this idea of creating a sisterhood that does not reproduce the same patriarchal and sexist norms into action. And so they did this in two ways. First was just through basic kind of knowledge production. You have to remember that in the 1960s and early 1970s, there was still not a widespread conversation about reproductive capacity. Women were often kept in the dark about options for controlling birth. The birth control pill only came into existence and FDA approved in 1960. And abortion was still something that was being hotly debated and rising in the ranks of the Supreme Court until we get to Roe v. Wade. So one of the things that the Third World Women's Alliance published was just simply a page about anatomy, about female anatomy, so that women could understand how the reproductive organs work, what options they had for birth control, and how to understand what could possibly be difficult situations of getting pregnant without the option of abortion. And how this links back up into their speech is that they were concerned that many times women were having children that they did not want to have or were not capable of having and kind of taking care of, but they felt that they lacked options and knowledge about what to do about this. So a way of just kind of offering this basic anatomy session was a way of helping them understand both the sisterhood that was around them and the fact that women were all in this together, but also that perhaps they could kind of have some agency in thinking about how and when they wanted to have children, or if they wanted to have children at all. Another example they put in their skills building kind of section of Triple Jeopardy were basic household needs. So they emphasized that often one of the ways in which Black women and brown women were kept down was that they had to pay rent to a landlord, and then they were expected to call on said landlord, typically a man, right, as the property owner, to fix anything, do anything within the house, and they were therefore kind of at his whim for raising rents, when their living conditions, etc. So one of the things that they tried to do was publicize basic skill building, how to fix some things without calling on a man to do this. And that might be something as simple as fixing a faucet or fixing an air conditioner, or something more complicated like building basic things that women or children might need in their house. And while this may seem silly or small or contrite, it was a way of offering women of color a certain level of agency. It was a way of saying, helping them seize their own capabilities and say, you know, you don't have to only depend on men to do this. You can fight against kind of power dynamics that are existing in your lives. And you can do this in a very kind of quotidian or everyday fashion. Not everybody has to kind of get up and wage revolution every day. So the Third World Women's Alliance, I think, is a very important example of how this kind of dialectic between thought and action, the ways in which Black women and brown women were kept down by the oppressive forces that, you know, we know as superstructures like racism, capitalism, imperialism, but how that trickled down into their everyday lives. And their efforts, particularly through their print culture, to kind of help women become empowered was a key way in which Black women and brown women engaged in this public sphere and tried to shape their lives and assert some form of self-determination and control. So in conclusion, I just want us to think about how Black women intellectuals, particularly in the Black Power movement, might speak more broadly to some of the common themes that we're discussing today. I want us to suggest that when we talk about speech, right, I want to express in the most broad and capacious terms. And I'd like for us to use the examples I gave today as an example of how people can't always or don't always have the same access to the public sphere, can't always and don't always have the same kind of access to speech or power or audience. And I would invite us to think about some of the ways in which marginalized groups, particularly Black and brown women, might articulate their thoughts, articulate their ways of seeing the world, and move people towards action that might seem quote unquote non-traditional because they are not based in kind of mainstream methods or ideas. I'd also like to encourage you to consider how you might see this in your life today going forward. How do people on a very kind of everyday basic level empower each other to make actions in their communities, in their campuses, to take care of each other, to assert and engage in politics, however you might see that and however that's construed, and move and create spaces for people to form coalitions and work together. I think particularly the Third World Women's Alliance is a great example of coalition building, where everybody is not altogether the same or experiencing things the exact same way, but there's enough overlap that they found a way to collectively move into action together. So I hope this has been productive and got your mind thinking about some of the questions that are up for debate during this period. And I look forward perhaps to hearing from some of you either virtually or via email about some of the ideas I presented today. Thank you.